Punctuation for Court Reporters, video number 55, the top 10 differences between LMEG and the BGGP. I'm Ken Wick. Let's get started. So just as a quick introduction, 86% of court reporters use either Morson's English Guide for Court Reporters, LMEG, or Court Reporting, Bad Grammar Good Punctuation, the BGGP. And only a few people use through Gregg's Reference Manual or another resource. So the question is, are there rule differences between LMEG and the BGGP? The answer is yes. I went through my book, the 99 Essential Rules for Court Reporting, and I found 47 differences just in those 99 rules. So both LMEG and the BGGP have a lot more rules, so I suspect there's a lot more differences. But this video is just going to focus on the top 10, and it's the top 10 in my opinion. So let's get started with the top 10. So difference number 1, and this is in order by my rules in the 99 essential rules, not in any particular order. So rule number 2 in that book, which is a video number 7 if you want to reference that, I'm going to call common fragments. And LMEG says to put a period after okay and all right at the beginning of a sentence. So just the beginning for these two fragments. But the BGGP adds a few more words. So it also says use a period after okay and all right, and also adds a very well defined and strong interjections like these at the beginning and the end of a sentence. So the BGGP is more expansive than the LMEG. So just a couple examples. Both would punctuate this question, all right, what time did you leave? Both would punctuate it that way. LMEG would say answer shoot. I'm just going to say shoot. And it would probably use a comma, because after an introduction you do commas. I don't recall. But the BGGP would use a period. Would say answer. I'm just going to use the word shoot. I don't recall. So difference there. Difference number 2, and I'm just going through these quickly. If you want to see these rules in more detail, please refer to the video or the rule in the book. Difference number 2, I'm going to call it's rule actually 16-1 in the 99 rules, video number 13. So LMEG does not separate junior and senior with commas unless a person prefers it. That's the exception. So basically no separation with commas unless it's preferred. And this rule is consistent with the Gregg Reference Manual and the Chicago Manual style. Just a note. But the BGGP says separate junior and senior with commas. So in LMEG, these are examples. LMEG would punctuate it, Robert Smith Sr. graduated high school in 1956. And the BGGP would add commas here, Robert Smith, comma, Sr., comma, graduated high school in 1956. So that's difference number 2. Difference number 3 is end of sentence non-echo questions. And we're talking rule number 32 and video 19. So a non-echo question, sometimes called tag questions, or if it's at the end of a sentence, you can call it a tag question. Non-echo means it doesn't echo the words of the sentence. Now, if this doesn't make sense to you, look at the examples. It'll be crystal clear, or maybe clearer. So the LMEG says for an end of sentence non-echo question, it says use a period, but allows the use of the semicolon, and also allows a comma for the one-word questions right and correct. Now the BGGP says use a period, so this is similar, or this is the same, but use a semicolon to separate non-echo questions that contain right, correct, or true. So here, for here you have right and correct. It would be, with LMEG, it would be separated with a comma. With the BGGP, it would be separated with a semicolon. And if you don't know, I think I have the Gregg, both. I'm sorry, backup one. This is actually a common question that you see posted on the Facebook pages, is how would you punctuate this? And this is the reason why you get a lot of differing views or answers, is because you can have LMEG has, you do this, but you can do this or that, or maybe say, you could, here has 3 different punctuation marks just from the LMEG, and the BGGP has 2. So that's the reason you can have it different ways. Pick your style guide, I guess, is however you want to punctuate it. So both would punctuate this, so it would be the same in both references. You lost control of the vehicle due to the icy road. And then this is the end of sentence non-echo question. Is that accurate? This is the end of sentence non-echo question. As we see, both say use a period. And we don't, I guess you could use, according to LMEG, you could use a semicolon here. But we can't use a comma because it's not right or correct. And per BGGP would be period. And since it's not one of these, it's not a semicolon. Next, oh, there you go. I already had it. So LMEG would, semicolon allowable. And here's the next example is, according to LMEG, he worked late that evening, correct? So you could use a period, because that's what LMEG says. And I'm pretty sure it says, but a semicolon, remember it allows use as a semicolon, but a semicolon or comma are also allowable per LMEG. So LMEG, you could have a period, a semicolon, or a comma here. And the Gregg Reference Manual would use a comma here. So imagine that. Per LMEG, you could have any one of the 3 punctuation marks and you'd be correct. The BGGP would have a semicolon because it says use a semicolon for right, correct, and true. So it would punctuate this with a semicolon, and this would be, semicolon would also be correct per LMEG. So you can see there's a lot of variability in this, and how you can punctuate this, but you can see how the rule differs. Difference number 4 is questions that follow to be. This is Rule 33 in the 99 Rules, or video number 20. So LMEG says use a colon to separate a question introduced by an independent clause, or for emphasis. So use a colon when it's preceded by an independent clause, or if you want to emphasize the question. Otherwise, use a comma for separation, and no comma is needed for a short question. Now, it doesn't define short, but the examples are 2 or less words. And this rule is consistent with the Gregg Reference Manual and the Chicago Manual style. The BGGP says use a colon to separate a question introduced by an independent clause. So this is the same. LMEG and the BGGP both agree use a colon when it's introduced by an independent clause. Otherwise, no comma for separation. That's exactly the opposite of what LMEG says. Actually, basically the opposite of what the Gregg's Reference Manual and the Chicago Manual style say. So both would punctuate this as, my question is, did you see the accident? Now, this is an independent clause, so we use a colon. In LMEG, the next example is, notice the word this is missing, so it makes this not an independent clause. My question is, comma, did you see the accident? But the BGGP would punctuate this as, the question is, did you see the accident, with no comma. And also notice no capitalization. So that's another difference. Difference number 5 is a colon before a quotation, or when to use a colon before a quotation. This is rule number 37 in the 99 rules, or see video 21. LMEG says separate, so when do you use a colon before a quotation? Separate a formal quotation with a comma. It defines formal as meaning a legal or means legal or historical documents, so you're quoting from a legal or historical document or from speeches, etc. That's what it means by formal. The BGGP is different. It says a colon may replace a comma. So notice that if you don't know, the normal separator for introducing a quotation is a comma. So the BGG says you can replace the comma with a colon if the quotation is, quote, very long or very formal. And the BGG explains that formal is a judgment call, and very long refers to a block formatted quotation. A block formatted quotation is where you have text, and then if you've seen it in a book, there's a line, and then the text is indented. So from the left side. So the text, you can see how the text would run, how it's running along the left side here. There'd be space, and maybe the text would start with about where the word colon begins, and then it'd just be text. And block text is not introduced with quotation marks. So it says use it for block formatted quotations. Now, the Gregg Reference Manual says use a colon if introduced by an independent clause, or if the quotation is more than one sentence. Notice this is different. All three of these are different. So let's go to the Chicago Manual style. So it says use a colon if it's introduced by an independent clause. So it agrees with the Gregg's Reference Manual. And it says a colon may replace a comma, but it has to be used consistently. And this is the key right here. So basically, like I said before, normally a comma introduces a quotation, but you can replace it with a colon. But when you do, you need to use it consistently throughout the document. So what you find is how LMEG and BGGP and Gregg's Reference Manual have differed is they're going to say we're going to format this type of thing consistently. So for LMEG, that's formal quotations, meaning legal or historical documents. And for BGGP, that means block quotations or formal, which it says is judgment call. And for the Gregg's Reference Manual, that's going to say more than one sentence. So that is the difference between colon before a quotation. A hot mess. Well, maybe not a hot mess, just a difference of opinion. So there isn't really a right or wrong. This really says what style guide are you following. So quote and close quote. And this could be when someone, so this is when someone says quote and then something like he said quote blank 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 unquote, or he said quote unquote blank blank blank. So this is rule number 38 in the 99 rules, video number 21. LMEG says either one, separate spoken punctuation with commas with no quotation marks, or use quotation marks without including the spoken punctuation. Don't use both punctuation and quotation marks. So rather you put in the punctuation with no quotes, or you put in the quotes with no punctuation. You can't do both. The BGGP is the exact opposite. It says put in the punctuation, the spoken punctuation, and use quotation marks. So they do the exact opposite thing. Or this says do this, and the LMEG says don't do that. If you don't know, there's no other reference to go to for this. This is a purely court reporter problem, so you're not going to find any rules in the Gregg Reference Manual about this. So an example of LMEG case number 1, I told him comma, quote, comma, solve, comma, close quote, the problem. So I told him, quote, solve, close quote, the problem. So you separate the punctuation with commas, and that's how you have it. Situation number 2 is I told him, quote, solve, quote, unquote, the problem. You just use quotes with no spoken punctuation. With the BGGP would say I told him, quote, solve, close quote, the problem. So here you'd include the spoken punctuation and the quotation marks. So there's that one. Difference number 7 is o'clock. And what I mean by that is you're going to use words or figures before o'clock. This is rule number 66 in the 99 rules. See video number 33. So LMEG uses words before o'clock. The BGGP says use figures with ciphers. Those are zeros. Ciphers are zeros before o'clock. So here you use LMEG words, BGGP figures with the zeros, or if necessary, zeros. So examples would be you left for work at 7 o'clock in the morning. So LMEG would use words. Maybe I should have color coded that blue. The BGGP would said you left at 7 o'clock in the morning. So here you'd use figures with the ciphers with the zeros, just not 7. Interesting to note that the Gregg Reference Manual actually calls the BGGP not a correct format, but that's just its style. So adjacent numbers, this is actually Rule 66 and 99 rules, video number 35. It actually isn't a rule. It's actually based upon an example in a rule. So it's interesting to note that how this situation plays out differently in the style guides. So let's say a person says, my nephew is 6'4", meaning 6 feet 4 inches. And this is how you write this. You don't put a comma in here. So how do you punctuate this? Do you just leave a space, put a comma, put a hyphen, put a dash? Whoops. So LMEG, separate with a hyphen. My nephew is 6'4". However, LMEG allows 2 adjacent figures to be written separated by, quote, a comma or other punctuation. So I guess technically you could put, besides a hyphen here, you could put a different punctuation mark. But it's basically saying a punctuation mark needs to be here. The BGGP would uses a space or a hyphen. Either are correct. So my nephew is 6'4" with no punctuation. My nephew is 6-4. So in this case they agree, but in this case the two style manuals do not agree. Interesting to note, the Gregg Reference Manual says use a comma with either words or figures, it says. So my nephew is 6'4", or my nephew is 6'4". So you put a comma in between. Difference number 9 is compound adjectives. Rule number 92 in the 99 rules, see video number 44 and 51. Where actually I think like video 51, 52, 53, and 54 are all about compound adjectives, I believe. I can't go over this one in detail, but the main difference is LMEG and the BGGP handle compound adjectives completely different. The LMEG uses patterns, and it defines a compound adjective as 2 or more words, when 2 or more words are combined that express a single idea. And then it goes on to have 16 different patterns that are basically parts of speech, like noun plus adjective, things like that. And you go to the pattern, and it says hyphenate that pattern. Don't hyphenate that pattern. believe it or not, I believe most patterns are hyphenated. Whereas the BGGP hyphenates when it forms a unit. Notice here it says two or more words that express a single idea. It says when the words form a unit. So, and then the BGGP has different rules that are more based on concepts and situations. So this is, LMEG's more about patterns. This one's more about seeing if it forms a unit. And personally, this is, the BGGP is how I actually determine if I need to hyphenate a word. I have a couple exceptions memorized, like nothing with a, that's like, it's like a poorly written. It ends with an ly and then it's another word. I know I don't hyphenate that situation. But basically the BGG piece would say, do you hyphenate? Now imagine there's no hyphen here and you had to determine if two-door automobile, if two-door was hyphenated or not. So what you do, because you need to have two or more words combined that express a single idea or a unit, what you do is you test them separately with the word. Is it a, and this is a quote from the BGGP, it is neither a two automobile nor a door automobile, because what you do is you test each word with the noun. So this is the adjective, this is the noun. You test each adjective with the noun to see if it makes sense. And this is what the BGGP is doing. It's not a two automobile nor a door automobile. Therefore, the words are hyphenated because it forms a unit, because it's not a two automobile nor a door automobile. It's a two-door automobile. Two-door has to be combined, that combination forms a single idea or unit to modify automobile. Therefore, it has to be hyphenated. So that's what I do. I usually do this test when I need to know if I hyphenated. I just test it against the noun individually, and if it doesn't make sense, it's not a two automobile, not a door automobile, boom, I just hyphenate it and just move on. So that's so how LMEG and GGP hyphenate compound adjectives, or how they determine, are completely different. Personally, the BGGP method is much easier because you have a simple testing pattern, and then you memorize a couple situations that you don't have to hyphenate, and you don't have to memorize and look up all these various patterns. So the last difference is a long compound adjective. There's a rule number 93 in the 99 rules, video number 44. LMEG says, if a hyphenated compound adjective is 6 or more words or could be misread, then instead of hyphenated, you close it in quotation marks. The BGGP says, use quotation marks when a compound adjective is, quote, something someone might say in a conversation. And the longer the saying, compound adjective, the less likely hyphens are going to be clear. So here's an example. Here's, I'm going out of my freaking mind, smile. Because this is the noun. This has to be the adjective. So I'm going out of my freaking mind. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. So it's 6 or more. So according to LMEG, we would put quotations around instead of hyphenating it. So just as comparison, and BGGP, I would agree this is something someone might say in a conversation. Therefore, you would not hyphenate it, but you would hyphenate it. But since it's so long, then you use quotation marks. And just compare, because imagine you said, "Oh, I'm going to hyphenate it." This is what it would look like hyphenated, and that just looks ugly, or could be misread. So you hyphenate it. Believe it or not, the Gregg's Reference Manual is I forgot the exact rule. It's a lot more accommodating to putting things in quotes, and then it actually says either the quote form or the hyphenated form are correct. So according to the Gregg's Reference Manual, this is correct since it is a compound adjective, but this looks better in quotation marks. So those are the 10 differences. So If you are going to say, please subscribe to my videos. And if you like the video, please hit like. And check out my videos or my other videos and my books in the description. Thank you.